This week, we've been covering all the different technology systems that you need to grow your accounts and to scale your accounts, and the processes that we'll start to use that are wrapped up around those systems. This has been primarily introduction to each of those systems, and right now we're going to be focusing in on meeting management. And this is a just kidding moment, because this is really about making sure you have the processes in place for meeting management. For most companies, your meeting management should be embedded into one of your other systems. I typically keep my meeting management in my knowledge base. If your project management system accommodates meeting management, it is also a really good place to keep it. So how and why do I suggest using your knowledge management system for meeting management? The reason for that is because meetings are actually one of the best places to capture knowledge, and putting it into the knowledge management system is an acknowledgement of that. As mentioned earlier, keeping notes and transcripts from your meetings actually allows you to do some very interesting things, including prepare for the next meeting by reviewing the last meeting. One of the ways to prepare for meetings is different, and the way you prepare for meetings is different depending if they're internal versus external. You do not come to a meeting with your clients without reviewing the materials in advance so that you can be adequately prepared. The flip side is if it's an internal meeting, you can almost go the Amazon route, where you can allow people the first few minutes to review everything. It's not quite the 6-page memo that Amazon is famous for, but it's a good hybrid and a good middle ground. And we'll actually see an example of that in the upcoming cheat sheet. It will include some of the differences between internal and external meetings. The best way to prepare for meetings is to have an agenda. The agenda is the cornerstone of the meeting. Every meeting deserves an agenda. The upcoming meeting cheat sheet is a base template that you can modify as necessary for the specific meetings that you have. If you have an external client meeting, send them the agenda in advance for the meeting. This does two things. It lets them add topics and it lets them add people. This is a great way of making sure the right things are being discussed with the right people at the right time. We'll discuss the process for internal meetings as part of that cheat sheet. If you want to transform your meetings, follow these steps. Share your screen. Take live notes on the agenda. Capture to-dos. Capture decisions. Taking live notes during the meeting is incredibly empowering, and it changes the tone of the meetings. They can be done quicker, they can be done more purposefully, and they can have greater impact. This practice does multiple things. First, it focuses the attention on a single thing. It's very easy for people to be scattered during a meeting and not pay attention. Second, it restricts the meeting. Things that are there to be talked about and things that are not there to be talked about are explicit. You can put those in as follow-ups if it's not relevant to the meeting and discuss it later. Restricting the meeting to the things that we need to talk about is key to productive meetings. Far too frequently, we allow people to squirrel a meeting into being unproductive and about unimportant things. Third, it encourages others to clarify their thoughts. What I love about this practice is everyone is taking live notes, or if I'm taking live notes and they're watching me take live notes and I mess up, you'd be shocked at how frequently people misunderstand what people are talking about. It empowers them to say, you know what, I see what you wrote there. That's not what I meant. Let's review that and change that because this is what I was actually trying to say, or this is what I said, and this is what we need to have out of that. My passion is product management. The most important skill in product management is understanding what your customers are telling you and translating that into software requirements. Well, guess what? Then software developers have to translate those requirements into software. And this translation layer is like a game of telephone. And this is why a lot of software sucks, because it sucks as a process. Well, this process of taking live notes that everyone sees and participates in reduces the number of translations for your meetings and for the work that needs to be done. It reduces the number of people in the telephone line. It can be completely transformational and transformative to your organization. Fourth, it allows you to highlight key decisions. It allows you to focus on those decisions and call them out and say, we made a decision on XYZ, and then you can make sure that decision was actually made and you can reference it later. And lastly, you can highlight new tasks or follow-up items. Frequently, we walk out of meetings with more work than we walked in with, and yet how frequently are those actually captured, and how much of that work was actually assigned or created in a meeting is actually processed and handled, which leads to our next part, processing the notes. What does processing the notes entail? Well, it entails 1, quickly editing and cleaning up rough spots. 2, handling simple tasks immediately, like scheduling follow-up meetings. 3, transferring more difficult tasks to the appropriate system of record. 4, writing a recap of the meeting. You can see a previous cheat sheet on the meeting summary. And 5, send the recap of the meeting. This cheat sheet is a super high-level template. It should be adjusted for each meeting and saved as a meeting-specific template. To start, I usually have a list of internal attendees if the meeting is a dedicated internal meeting. You may change this to maybe to be the primary department and other departments. This segmentation of company versus client or client versus contractor if an internal meeting, or support department versus executive team for an internal meeting helps remind people of who the attendees are, and it's a psychological trick to remind them to behave relative to the attendees of the meeting. Now you can check off who attended, and this is helpful for a couple of reasons. It's a quick reminder of who was there when evaluating the meeting after the fact. It's also a reminder to make sure that the meeting notes are sent to the attendees who didn't attend. The next section has a gray box around it, and I usually reserve this section for internal meetings. I love to start internal meetings with good news or wins because it helps lift the spirits. My preferred pattern for writing in each of these sections is to include my name and then a dash and then the item. Something like, at Chris, resolved a long-standing issue with McDonald's. A reminder for internal meetings, everyone should have the link for the meeting in advance. People can fill in the gray area in advance of the meeting. Everyone can have 5 minutes to contribute to the gray section while you're waiting on the stragglers, and this helps improve that efficiency of that awkward waiting period that exists in most meetings today. Next up is the bad news or the losses. This needs to be acknowledged specifically because sometimes calling out the shit that happened since the last meeting spawns a potential topic of conversation for the agenda. This is how you take your losses and use them to transform your company. Your losses should lead to process improvements to eliminate those in the future. After that, it's nice to include an appreciation section. This shouldn't be wanton brown-nosing, but it's a super nice way of codifying into your culture that we are a team and we recognize the people who help us do things. For this section, I usually write something like, at Chris, maybe a heart sign, at Bob, hearts to Bob for going above and beyond to diagnose the McDonald's issues, which is when you get a chance to help someone else or recognize what they've done. This is extremely powerful in a departmental meeting where we want to call out those efforts because they sometimes become spring pads for new processes, procedures, or knowledge base items. The next area for internal meetings is potential topics. Hopefully people have filled this out in advance. If not, they can fill it out in the beginning of the meeting, and then we review those topics. This is the important part of the meeting. It becomes the agenda setting. You might say topics 2, 3, and 4 are the most important. And so what do we do about the other items that do not make the agenda? Well, we have some options. Let's put a hold on topics 1, and 5. This means we acknowledge that they exist, but we'll punt them to the next meeting. Or topic 1 can be addressed by Bob offline. This means you can add it to the to-do section of the meeting notes. The agenda is where we're going to spend 75% of the time. The agenda becomes the place where the meeting notes are captured. You do this by hitting enter and indenting and taking notes while you're having the conversation live while you're sharing the screen. Depending on your organization, you may or may not want to have decisions called out in the notes section or move them into a dedicated area. It depends on how your meetings flow. Perhaps the most important part of the live meeting template is the follow-up item section. This can be a checkbox based if your system or knowledge base allows for it, or it can just be a simple list. And if it is a simple list, cross the items off when they're complete. Do not delete them. Now, the purpose of the follow-up section and completing that is not to say, hey, we're managing our work from this meeting template. What it's actually doing is saying we've identified 5 things during the meeting, and we need to make sure that we've processed those 5 things, which means we've either done them or we've moved them to the correct system of record. The next cheat sheet is the meeting checklist. That's everything we've talked about during this video, but this one is important enough. Meetings are such a giant time suck in most organizations. Just changing the way you run meetings will change your company. The basics for the meeting are preparing an agenda, sharing the agenda before the meeting, sharing your screen. Your screen should have the agenda visible. You should take live notes during the meeting. You should encourage others to do the same. You should highlight new to-dos in the meeting notes. You should highlight decisions in the meeting notes. You should process the meeting notes after the meeting, and you should send the processed notes with the recap before the end of the day. If you do this, You will have more effective meetings and you will spend less time and money in and on your meetings. Thank you and have a nice day.